POV, you get your dream job working for Henry Ford, but it's straight out of a Black Mirror episode. This is Fairlane, his main estate. But Ford didn't just own houses and factories. He owned the town. He owned the people inside of them. He was technically America's first billionaire before the word even existed and worth what would be close to $200 billion today. There's just no way to be ethical with that kind of money. He didn't become powerful until his late 40s. Before that, his family struggled to survive, moving constantly, living in all these rented rooms and temporary housing. Once he finally made his fortune, he went back and bought all the little places that he and his family had ever lived and moved them to Greenfield Village. In his mind, anything that he touched was historically important and he had to preserve it. And he got the power to do that through the Model T and the assembly line. Let's be clear though, Henry Ford didn't invent the car, the gasoline engine, interchangeable parts, or the factory assembly line. Those things already all existed. What he did was take all these things and apply them to something no one else would do. And why did no one else do it? Because it was extremely dangerous. His real genius wasn't the mechanics. It was actually manipulating people. He got workers to do unethical work, things no one else dared to do, by offering higher wages, shorter hours, making it all seem worth it. Edsel, his son, grew up with this kind of coercion, and he turned out nothing like him. He was sensitive and down to earth. He was Michigan's own JFK. He wanted the company to evolve with the times. Henry obviously didn't. So instead, he surrounded himself with these pseudo-sons. One of the most important was Harry Bennett. Henry put him in charge of Ford's service department, which worked basically like his private police force. Bennett hired over 500 former convicts. They were glorified gangsters with Ford contracts. Eventually, he did get in trouble for the local newspaper that he bought that ran Propaganda Weekly. In court, his editor took the fall, claiming Henry had no idea they were writing about this stuff. So strange, because Hitler literally loved him. He cited Ford in his infamous book, kept a huge portrait of Henry hanging in his office. And even 10 years later, Henry accepted a super special German award on behalf of Hitler's admiration. And don't forget about the factory he had in Germany in the early days of World War II. The one that supplied the German soldiers with vehicles, using labor from work camps. Of course, once the US entered the war, Ford claimed he had nothing to do with it. But he still got all the financial benefits from it. This was the real Henry Ford we should be remembering. The authoritarian who couldn't read or write, but was convinced he knew how everyone else should live. This was the man who sued the Chicago Tribune for libel after they called him an ignorant idealist. In court, he had to prove them wrong by answering basic American history questions, which he ended up getting mostly wrong. Ford said he didn't need to know things because he had experts. He could just summon them by pressing a button. That won him the lawsuit. And since he believed he knew how everyone else should live, he started experimenting, building dystopian company towns. He monitored his workers, and then he punished anyone who didn't live by his rules. Not everyone got that whole famous $5 a day wage or the 40-hour work week. Those were perks that came with different conditions. You didn't get them just by being hired. You had to earn them by proving you met his moral standards. That meant living under constant surveillance. Investigators would show up at your home without warning to check if it was clean. They questioned your spouse, your children, even things about your spending habits. If you were under 22, you had to be married, unless you were a woman. Then you weren't eligible at all. Well, unless you were a single mother. You couldn't drink, and you weren't even allowed to have overnight visitors. But once the Great Depression hit, he laid off more than half of his employees. These are the ones who lived in company towns, suddenly had nowhere to live. So how did he keep the factories running? Find out what happens in the next part.